this session of the series of reflections on Georgia politics. We've had some wonderful sessions so far and continue to provide these for you, and we certainly have one in store today. I'm hopeful that there may be some other people who are out there circling around looking for parking, because it was certainly true when I came in that there was not that much parking available. But we are glad to have you today. Also, keep in mind the schedule. The next program will be 1 week from today, here in the same place. The Georgia political figure who will be under discussion at that time will be Griffin Bell. Certainly look forward to that. But today we have former Senator Mack Mattingly with us, and our gracious host, Bob Short, will lead us into a discussion here. Delighted to have Bob always. He does a tremendous job for us. Senator Mattingly, we're so happy to have you as well.
Thank you.
Turn it over to you, Bob.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator, for being with us today. This is a series of reflections on Georgia politics. So we want you today to reflect with us during that period when you were coming up down Glenn County, the Republican Party, for being, as far as I'm concerned, the kingpin of Republicans in Georgia. And we want to start off, if we may, by asking you to give us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Anderson, Indiana.
Well, that starts out my politics, I guess. I forget the guy who called me a carpetbagger the first time. At least Bob had that. But as far as reflections, of course, my life started in 1931 when I was born in Anderson, Indiana. And my fortune started right then because of my parents. They were in the Depression back then. They had come through World War I. And I recall my father never went further than the 8th grade. And before I was born, he worked in a plant making rubber tires, and he got his arm burned. And so later he went to work as an assistant salesman in a furniture retail store. And back then, it was difficult times back then. And he rose to become a salesman. And I remember when I was aware of all things, I remember when he became assistant manager, then he became manager of the store. Later on in his life, he owned the corporation. So it shows you what you can do in America. And my mother came from Hardy stock. Her mother was a Methodist minister, and both her mother and father. So that's the base I grew up in. Now, all due respect to Indiana, I very seldom ever go back because I really didn't like it. Because it was cold, very cold. But the reason why I live on the coast is because it's cold. And the reason why there's not that many people here today is because it's cold. But basically, my time in life was January the 7th, 1931, when I was born. And I was fortunate, as I said, having loving parents. And I had one brother. All my family is now deceased. In fact, 3 of them died during my run and also during my tenure in the United States Senate. So it's been as far as my looking back, I guess my big break came by just having good love by my parents and everybody, my relatives and all the friends I had. And I grew up and graduated from high school there, went on to Indiana University. The Korean War came along, and I enlisted at that time during the Korean War. Served 2.5 years during the Korean War, and a year. I thought I would get out early out of the military, which they didn't give me an early out, so I had to stay the full 4 years. I went into the Air Force to become a pilot, and after I got in, they said, well, your eyes are not exactly correct. So they said, we'll send you to OCS to become an officer. And I said, no, I think I'll just stay as a enlisted man. So I when I was discharged in 1955 as a staff sergeant. But I enjoyed my lifetime, the 4 years to go as a lifetime in the military. But it probably helped me grow like it does most people, I think, men or women in the military. And then I came back and finished college at Indiana University. I never forget going back. And the dean talked to me and said, you know, I don't know whether your grades are good enough to get you through. I said, just cool it, you know, I'll get through. And so in 2 years' time, I graduated with a marketing degree in business. And at that time, I got a job. I got married right away. And I was about 5 years older than my wife. She was a Phi Beta Kappa, so always marry above you, which always helps you, which is what I did. And I worked for Arvin Industries for 2 years, and I tried to get them to put me in sales, and which they said, you don't have the ability to be in sales, you know. So I got a job with IBM in sales. And IBM thought I was smart enough to be in sales. I spent 20 and a half years with IBM. In fact, the way I got my job with IBM, during my tenure in the Air Force, was stationed several bases, you know, from Saudi Arabia to Georgia, different places. But Savannah, I was stationed at Hunter Air Force Base. It was a SAC base back then. And I decided that's where I wanted to retire. It was warm. I recall Indiana taking final exams at 5 below zero, which I didn't like. And so I came back after I graduated, and with Arvin Industries, I came down to Savannah, walked in off the street, this is true, on a Saturday at an IBM office, and asking for a job. And the office manager was in there, and he said, if you would just wait 2 or 3 hours, he said, I want you to meet somebody. So I went back and I met the sales manager, the man who ran the place, and they hired me. So I spent 20 and a half years, probably the greatest time of my life, with IBM Corporation in Georgia. Back then, Georgia only had 2 branch offices, one's in Savannah, one's in Atlanta, and they had sub-offices, and I had one in Brunswick, Georgia, and which is right there by St. Simons. It was a great career with IBM. I love selling. I guess that came from my father, but whatever it was a good way to make money back then. And IBM then sent me to, during that time, sent me to New York to teach sales training. I went there for 3 weeks. I knew that isn't where I wanted to be. So I came back and got my old territory back and did that. So, and that's, you know, basically my background is, you know, I guess I'm a little bit gregarious. I like meeting people. I've always done that. But with that, I think that's sort of the background of where my background, how I developed, you know, with my parents, my dad's business, and how I got my first job, basically my first real good job. That's not excluding the Senate or other things. It was a good job, but probably not as permanent as IBM. But it's been a great and wonderful time. I think that one of the best things I can recall, when I hadn't really thought about this interview that much or talking that much, people always say, well, what is the best thing that happened to you in your life? You know, they want to say in the Senate, well, it's your life. I guess it's just the love of people. You're meeting so many great people, and you know, so many times we hear in politics or any other thing about how bad this person or how bad that person is, or these people in this country are like this or like that. I can tell you, I've traveled the world over in the United States, in Georgia. I can tell you, most people are great people, and they have love and compassion in their hearts. They do. You know, it's really, in today's world with so much media, you think that everybody's bad or everything is bad. It's not that way. Basically, people in the United States and the world around are good people. And so with that, I will just leave that. And
okay, we're going from people to politics, because politics is people.
right.
How did you get involved in politics to begin with?
Well, first, I mean, I couldn't have picked a better state to come to that had a sort of almost a totalitarian type government here in Georgia back then, because they had no political parties. They just had one political party. When I came there in 1951, I think in 52 or sometime, that's when Marvin Griffin was running all this for stuff. They only had one political party. And when I came with IBM in 1959 and lived on St. Simon's Island and operated out of that territory down there, I got more concerned about politics. And then in 64, 63, really, when Barry Goldwater decided to run for president of the United States. And I looked at his principles, what he believed in. He had 4 basic principles of lower taxes, individual responsibility, limited government, and a strong national defense. I said, I can subscribe to that. And so I said I would get involved in the Goldwater campaign, and I became the Goldwater campaign chairman, what they call the 8th Congressional District in 64. Was elected an alternate delegate to the National Convention in 64 in San Francisco, the Cow Palace. And I had gone to the 100% Club, and you make these clubs with IBM. So I was that year, 64, the summer, I was in New York at the convention. Then I flew to San Francisco to be an alternate delegate for Goldwater. And in the Georgia delegation, one of the people had dropped out, and I got the vote for Goldwater as an alternate delegate. So my philosophy and ideology, which were basically surrounded by my time as being an entrepreneur and all this sort of stuff in the business world, and plus back then had the Johnson years and all these years that were going on, or Lyndon Johnson and Kennedy and all those. There were always these elements, but there really wasn't 2 voices in Georgia. So that's where I really struck out to try to help assist people in establishing a 2-party system in Georgia. And in 1964, Goldwater only carried for 5 states in the United States. Georgia happened to be one of them. And that's when Bo Calloway got elected as a congressman in Georgia. 1964, the 3rd Congressional District in that area over there by Pine Mountain in Columbus, Georgia. So he was really the first, although there was a lot of things that happened before that in the Republican Party, but nothing of any stature until he won that race. And then in 1966, he ran for governor, and then there were 8 people who ran for Congress. We needed some bodies to run as Republicans back then for Congress. I happened to be one of the bodies in 66, and obviously I didn't get elected. We only elected 2 out of the 8, and the reason why the 2 got elected and Calloway didn't get elected was when Lester Maddox became the nominee. Everybody thought Ellis Arnold was going to be the nominee, and anybody who lived out in a more rural area like we did down in the old 8th district would probably be elected. But it turned out just the opposite. Lester became the nominee. He was more conservative perceived than Calloway, and he won. And we elected 2 congressmen. They were both from Atlanta, which is a more liberal area than the rest of the state. So anyhow, that was sort of the growth of the party, and I was involved then. I became a congressional the district chairman for the 8th Congressional District Republican Party, and just steadily got involved in the state party. And it grew, and I became state chairman in the mid-70s. But just prior to that, I had created what we call a long-range planning committee for the conservatives. And I got people like Newt Gingrich, Paul Coverdale, myself, Bob Urban, John Linder, Bill Amos, who used to be Callaway's campaign manager, and 3 or 4 other people. And the person that you probably wouldn't know in this room would be a man called Bob Teeter, who ended up being the pollster for Bush 1 and was involved in politics. He was out of Michigan. So anyhow, we would go around the state making all these speeches, but we sort of set up the base of how we thought the Republican Party should be, the principles they should run on. We went out and got candidates, what they should believe in, and that's how we began really the trench work for the Republican Party in the state of Georgia. And it came. I had no idea. None of us. Coverdale, Gingrich, or myself, all three of us from out of state. Duke being from Pennsylvania, Coverdale was from Iowa, and I was from Indiana. We had no conception that we were ever going to run for public office. We were just trying to get people involved in the state of Georgia, and along with that conservative philosophy, and it kept generating, and it gelled. We thought in '76 when I was state chairman, I guess probably it was my fault, not my fault. I always took credit that I got Jimmy Carter elected. I was Republican chairman. But basically he got elected, and then we just worked harder and harder. And that's when Ford got involved back then, and then when in 1980 when Reagan was running, of course. Prior to that, in 1979 is when I decided I was going to run for the United States Senate.
Let's talk about 1980. Some people say that was a stunning upset.
Well, I guess you have to go back to, I guess anybody who gets elected thinks it's probably a stunning upset, and those that get defeated think it was a stunning upset. So, but my venture into it started in 1979. I mean, I decided 18 months in advance. I planned it out to where I had to make it. I had 2 daughters and a wife and house payments. So I worked like a dog with IBM to save up the money that I knew I could have for my family to live for 18 months. And I did that. I set that money aside. And because I knew if I lost, I could always come back. I had a problem getting a job, but I knew I could work. But that campaign took 18 months. And when it started out, I think there were 3 on the Republican side, and I think 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken, on the Democrat side. Here from young here, Selma was running that primary on the Democrat side, and Herman Talmadge, Dawson Mathis, and several other people. So, but anyhow, basically it was they thought they could defeat Talmadge in the primary, the Democrats did, and then there would be clear sailing against a Republican, and which turned out to be the case. But they felt like that, and if they could ever get through that primary, they'd have it home free. But they didn't realize is, I don't know, how many people in here, raise your hand, are not from Georgia?
Not from Georgia?
Not from Georgia. Okay. What they didn't understand back then were what we call demographics. They did not understand the demographics of Georgia had changed. You're IBMers from Indiana, everybody, they're all different places, but had changed. And they thought it was still the same old, power base of the sheriffs and things like that in the state of Georgia and the old Democrat base, and it just wasn't. So they ran, and Talmadge had problems. In fact, when I announced, we were going to announce about 3 months, but he finally had some problems, and we went to announcement for about 3 months, and then we finally announced. It didn't bother a lot of the Democrats. They were running for him, just trying to skin him alive or something like that. But anyhow, they thought they could beat him in their primary, and it ended up being a runoff on the Democrat side, and then that's when Talmadge beat Miller in that primary. And my whole base of campaigning was about lowering the tax rates. Back then, the Kemp Roth, I kept beating it to death, and all these things about the strong national defense, trying to rebuild the national defense of this country, because Carter had not really done a good job in the defense structure of the country. But all the basic principles of conservatism in Goldwater. And I remember after the primary was over, you know, they said, Atlanta Constitution said, you know, the contest was basically over. Well, you know, we kept on campaigning, and it was harder for us to raise money, of course, as a challenger than it is for an incumbent. And we kept raising money, though, and it worked, and we didn't have to spend as much as he did. And we got into one debate with him in Savannah with the Realtor Association of Georgia, and he won. I won. And so they'd never debate again, which is fine. I mean, and I can say this, after I defeated Talmadge, I never said a bad word about him. And in fact, we became friends, you know, through the years after that. And remember, he divorced his wife, and his new wife, I saw him at his funeral, and she says, Herman always says, you did the best favor for him he ever had. He said, because if you hadn't met him, you would never met me, which I thought was real. But anyhow, in 80, as Bob was saying, the election, we knew about a week out that we had gotten ahead in the polling, about 10 days out. And then when election night came, of course, you know, some of the rural areas always come in, and we knew what the percentages were going to be down in those areas. And then we also knew where, you know, our ducks live, that were going to vote for us. And it came out, and we won by probably about 37,000 votes. I always like to say that, you know, I'm still in the positive on running the Senate in a regular election, because I won by 35,000, lost by 22,000, I'm up about 10,000 pretty good. But yeah, it was I think it probably more of a shock to the Atlanta Constitution than it was to the general population of Georgia back then. But it was you know, then you had to go to the Senate to work after that.
One of the interesting things I was learning was that President Carter defeated President Reagan in Georgia by a good margin, and yet you had a higher percentage of votes.
Well, that brings up a good story. In fact, it was Carter got 58% of the vote, Reagan got 42%, and John Anderson got 1% in 1980 race. And I don't forget, before Reagan got sworn in and I got sworn in, we were at a function of it in Washington, D.C. And I came through the line. I hadn't known him anything. He said, Mack? I said, yes. He says, you know, your coattails weren't long enough to drag me across the finish line in Georgia. But that's, he was always had some humor about stuff like that. But it's true. It was, it shows you how people, independents and Democrats and the Republicans would go to the candidate of their choice. And it wasn't so much the party label as it was what you said or believed in or what they didn't like about somebody else. And you know, his history proves, you know, over time, you know, what plays out. You know, people vote different ways. Some people vote for people, some people vote against people. You know, or they just stay home. But it's it was I think quite a victory in not only in Georgia, but it was a big victory in Georgia. But across the United States, they elected 16 Republicans that year in the United States Senate to take the majority.
So you went to Washington in a class that became the majority for the first time in, I believe, nearly 20 years.
Right, or longer.
Yeah.
Given longer, yeah.
And you got some great committee assignments.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I got on the Appropriations Committee. And people stay there for years and years and never get on the Appropriations Committee. I never forget when Richard Russell was on the Armed Services Committee. And when he had the opportunity to move to the Appropriations Committee, he went over and got on the Appropriations Committee. So that's basically where a lot of the power is. The authorizing committees are like the Armed Services Committee, but if you can be on defense authorization, that's what they fund the programs. And same thing with agriculture. You'd be on the agriculture committee like Zach Chambliss is. He's been chairman, now he's ranking, but they don't fund the programs. The money that goes to programs comes through the appropriations committee. And that's, if we look in current day, and this is one of the big objections I have to current day Republicans in Congress and the president has been their lack of economic controls of the budget. They let the budget get out of control, and, you know, spending get out of control. But anyhow, I was fortunate to get good committee assignments. But here you are in a group of people, there are only 100 of you. And I can tell you, if there are 100 of you, I always figured you convince 50 other people, which is a whole lot better than having convinced 217 in the House of Representatives. So to me, it was easier working, and I was able to work with both sides. I've never had a problem even today when I go to Washington, D.C. I mean, I have no animosity with people across the other side of the aisle. You know, you have to understand that people have different ways they think and different things they believe in. But you know, you can still go to people and try to convince them to support you on particular issues, whether it be agriculture, you know, poultry, or whatever it may be. So, but I enjoyed it from the standpoint because, I mean, being a former salesman, I was sort of like selling to many people on these issues.
I noticed in looking back over your career that you paid most attention to trade and tax policy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was back then, of course, in 1980, it was the Kemp Roth tax cuts, which we were trying to get across the board, cut marginal rates back by 33%. And we succeeded in that first year by bringing them back down. The top rates were 28%. In fact, if you look now, the top rates are it's 39.6%. So it's increased, gone up almost 50% in that length of time. So, but yeah, economic policies, I mean, of course, back then, in 80, I went in 81, you look back, the problems where we had something like interest rates were 15%, inflation rate was about 20%, you know, the unemployment rate was about the same. So the economy of the country was in bad shape. So the way to try to change that around back then was to lower the tax rates, give the entrepreneurs a chance, give investors a chance to create jobs. And that's what happened. But the trade issues were the same thing. You know, it's the same thing today as it was back then. I mean, people always say there are unfair barriers out there, so you try to tear barriers down to make it more equitable to be able to trade. But we look now in today's world, I mean, it turned a lot more globally now than what it was, you know, 25 years ago, which is almost 27 years ago. So, you know, people object a lot of times and say, well, you know, all this clothes that come in from China or somewhere else, they forget where the cotton came from. It came from Georgia. You know, we ship the cotton to them, they make stuff out of it, and then they send it back to us. So we get paid different ways than that. But I was also involved in defense issues. I ended up being chairman of the military construction on the Senate Appropriations Committee. So defense has been a big thing. Of course, we have the Cold War going on and all that.
Let's talk a minute about the Cold War. 63 is when President Reagan made his famous Star Wars speech, which he said, 83. 83, right. 83. Yeah, I keep going back to the 60s. That's right. But anyway,
he go back further than that.
He made his famous Star Wars speech, in which he just bluntly told the Russians,
right,
you know, we're through, we're coming at you. And he gets a lot of credit for ending the Cold War. First of all, bringing down the Berlin Wall.
right. I think when they talk about Star Wars, I always like to correct history if I can, because I'm not that good a historian, but it was called SDI, Space Defense Initiative. And the media dubbed it Star Wars because they didn't like it. But mainly what it was designed for was to send either a missile or a laser or some type of object to intercept an incoming missile, or a missile to missile. And basically, I mean, this has been done, it used to be done through some agency called DARPA, Defense Research Development Agency. And mainly when you start doing stuff like that, you develop other things from it. A lot of technology that we use today probably came from that space SDI program. But that was one more pillar in the what Reagan used, like to go to the Soviet Union, to talk to them in different places and different leaders they had. And at the same time, they were deploying missiles in Europe to get the attention of the Soviet Union. You know, Carter started, but Reagan really accelerated the program. And we had them all over Europe. In fact, when I was stationed, when I was in NATO, we had them. They were laundered this. We had them all over the Bosphorus Strait in Turkey and all sorts of places. But all those things helped tear down the Soviet Union, really the communism. And when you look and see what did it, Reagan was part of it, Thatcher was part of it, the Pope was part of it. A major part of this thing were the churches in Eastern Europe, because that's where the people went to collect and then go out and protest. But they were a big focal point. All these things that happened under Reagan were massive. But when you get down to the street level, the people went to the churches, and that's where they got the information, a lot of the information. And they'd go out and do these protests, subject to being killed. Same thing with the Berlin Wall. So there was so many things involved in that. And when I look back on history, when people say, well, who are, my parents were fantastic. But when I look back on history, of the three most important people changed things on this globe, they were Reagan, they were Maggie Thatcher, and Pope. And they made things happen. They were responsible, I think, the three of them, and plus, a lot of other people, of making the wall come down, the Soviet Union change. So things happen. People make things happen. Reagan had a way about him as a leader that few leaders do. I think Roosevelt probably had it, Kennedy probably had it, and Reagan had it. But Reagan was able to articulate his positions clearly to people, and he did it with a smile too. You never saw him mad, ever. You never saw him mad even when he said, take down this wall. He had a different personality. So, but anyhow, that's, when you look back, and Bush was involved in it also, Bush won. So, but when we look back over history, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, all these different conflicts, I mean, what has lasted in our memory as long as the Cold War? It's almost 50 years. So, and I recall after I was defeated in 1986 for the Senate, and Reagan sent me to NATO as Assistant Secretary General for Defense. It was the highest ranking U.S. person at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, because by the treaty you couldn't be Secretary General. But I recall after the wall came down, I remember Helmut Kohl coming to NATO headquarters, and he was sitting in the room, I was sitting in the round, and he said, I never thought I would live long enough to see the wall come down. It was amazing. He said, he was all in German, translated. He said, you'd had to be 70, if you were from Leipzig, you had to be 72 years old to remember the last time you voted in a free election. So these are memorable things that to me, in my lifetime, in my span, either politics or just life, that have been unbelievable.
Well, you were there.
Yeah, we were there. It was, and when I listened to the news media today talking about why Bush didn't know what his intelligence was on Iraq and all this sort of stuff, I look back, we had more intelligence in NATO and the United States and all these places, and I would go to these SEAL rooms and get all this stuff. They had no earthly idea of that internal problems that the Soviet Union had. And they had no earthly idea of the people in Eastern Europe were going to rise up like they did. It's amazing how sometimes you think that here we are, we've got all these people on the ground, we've got all this intelligence. Hell, the Soviets had 5,000 tanks lined up along the Warsaw Pact countries over there. And nobody really saw that. And we had on staff over there people they call Sovietologists, meaning they were the experts on the Soviets. So sometimes when we think about why don't we know this sort of stuff, well, sometimes they just don't know. It's amazing.
You were a pioneer in line item veto.
Yeah, it sure was. There were two things I said I would do when not more than two, but two things I wanted to do immediately when I got elected. One was put in limitation of term limits, 2 terms for the Senate, 12 years in the House of Representatives. I only got one co-sponsor, me and one other guy. But the other thing was a line item veto. And, you know, they've never given it to the President of the United States yet. But instead of doing it by constitutional amendment, I came up with the idea. I really did. You said, did you ever come up with any ideas in your life? Well, not many. But they'd always try to do constitutional amendments, and that's almost a mission impossible to do that. Because you got to get it passed by in the Congress, and you got to get it passed by, you know, the states. So I said we'll do it by statute, meaning by law. We try to give it a statute that would be sunset in 2 years. I came up with the idea, and then I went to see Reagan about it, and Bush, who's the vice president in the Oval Office. We sat there and discussed it, and he says, "I'll support you." And then, and I had no idea he was going to do this, but in his State of the Union message, I forget which year it was, he came out in the State of the Union and said, "And I want you all to support Senator Mack Mattingly line item veto." You know, I almost passed out, but I was almost in shock they did that. But it was interesting, you know, and it actually became the forerunner for the one that did pass, that got struck down by the Supreme Court because they didn't do it exactly the way I had it down in the statute. So, but life goes on. So,
That's right. Well, let's talk for a minute about your service after the Senate. You went to NATO.
well, when I got out of the Senate in '87, I went to NATO about 2 or 3 months later. Have anybody ever been to Belgium? Yeah.
Great flags.
Yeah. Great food, but it rains all the time. The color of the sky is gray.
Great beer.
Great beer, yes. But it's I guess I had 120 people who worked for me. It's in NATO, at NATO headquarters. It's the international part. It's not the military section of it. But I had 120 people work for me from 12 different countries. And I had 4 directors. I had 1 Frenchman, 2 Brits, and a German in charge of armaments, air defense, and all that sort of stuff. In fact, I got them to create the first, what we call UV subcommittee, unmanned vehicle. And today you see UAVs, you know, the pilots, aircraft, and but you have both underwater, air, and sea, and land. So we created that when we were over there. And then the other thing we came up with was the, in fact, I got the Defense Department gave me the Defense Department's highest award they give for creating the conventional armaments planning system over there. But it was intriguing working with all the different people, and the problem in NATO is not like the Senate. The Senate lets you get the vote. At NATO, you've got 16 back then surrounding the table. Yeah, everybody has to agree. If one person disagrees, it doesn't go anywhere. So it's got to be unanimity. And right away you learn that it's going to be slow. But you were dealing with the, you know, we had people on the staff in Greece and Turkey, and which they didn't get along with one another. The French were there. You know, people don't like the French, but you know, I got along with them fine because I did things back channel with them. Meaning you'd go with them and you know do it in secret, basically, and get things accomplished that way. So, but mainly, you know, I traveled all the NATO countries. We had, you know, Persian missiles and nuclear missiles deployed in a lot of the countries in Denmark, Germany, up in the, like I said, the Bosphorus Strait, that between Turkey and the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviets could never get a ship or a submarine down that Bosphorus Strait because the Turks would totally wipe them out. But it was an intriguing and it was high tension time back then in the early 80s. It was amazing the transition from 87 to 90. In 87, they were out there, you know, killing people. I mean, you had the terrorists, you had the Red Brigade, they would capture these guys, U.S. Army military people, and they'd murder them. I recall when, if you recall, Salman Rushdie wrote a book back in the 80s about Khomeini in Iran. And then Khomeini put out and said, we want to kill him. And in all these places in Europe have Islamic populations. Brussels. And the Islamic leader, about 6 months after that came out about killing him, the Islamic leader in Brussels made the comment that Khomeini should sort of back off and moderate the situation. Next day they killed him and killed his chief of staff. So terrorism has been around for a long time. And you know, you've got good Islamics and you've got bad Islamics. They've just got a lot of Islamics in Europe, in France especially. But anyhow, back then it was you'd have to, whenever my director or people would have travel, they'd have to check in on a regular basis. The Soviets were spying all the time back then. It was amazing. You know, then you catch spies. We had Belgians that we'd catch spies. So, but anyhow, it was quite a time. It was the good thing about it with my wife, who was a French major. She's since passed away, and she was a Phi Beta Kappa. She was in heaven because she was there where she could speak French, and I learned to speak French in nouns. I could never use any verbs, but I could speak it in nouns. But it was an interesting and intriguing time from high tension to when the wall came down.
Can NATO play a role in the war on terrorism? Or should it play a role?
Well, of course they are. They're in Afghanistan now. The problem is, my opinion was that there's a treaty that created NATO. And after I left, when they began wanting to expand NATO to other countries, in fact, Sam and I were both opposed to it. We're not elected anymore, but we came out and signed a letter along with some other people opposed it. Because where do you stop? The Pacific Ocean, you know, put more countries in it. It was more workable when there were only 16, now there are 26. So So it makes it more difficult. But but as far as terrorism, yeah, sure. I mean, they can, what they need to do is put down on paper what they want to do at NATO. One thing, which they do through their intelligence agencies, fight terrorism within the countries that they are currently, have an interest in. But yeah, but they do the battle in Afghanistan. I don't know how many troops they got over there. But there needs to be more of that from NATO, because they used to be, they were confined to just within the NATO countries themselves, what they would do.
Can we win the war on terror?
Yes, you win any war. But, to think that the war on terror is going to be done in our lifetime is not going to happen. I mean, terrorism has been going on for years that I told you, like when I lived there in Brussels. I remember when they killed I can go through all the murders that they did, but it happens just now. It's on an accelerated basis now. It's just 9/11. But I think what you have to do is do what they're doing, is try to get as many people involved, in countries involved in it, and tell them it's why. But you can't make public everything you're doing about terrorism. Number one, we got cells here in the United States, a lot of them. The best thing to do with terrorists is you find them and you kill them. I mean, that sounds harsh, but that's what you have to do. I mean, they're trying to destroy not just the United States, but other people around the world. I probably shouldn't have said that, on tape, but that's exactly what you do with terrorism. And it's a cheaper way to fight a war. It's not like lining up tanks or aircraft or ships. All you have to have is 2 or 3 people who want to place bombs, explosives, or whatever it is. And what terrorism does, it creates fear. Maggie Thatcher, this is true, and back in the 80s, she would come to the NATO meetings, and terrorism was going on there. And she said back then, she says, the oxygen for terrorism is the news media. Think about that. The news media creates the oxygen for terrorism, and it does. So, and that's been, over 20 years ago. She said that. I mean, there's more to it than that, but that is one of the big things that the terrorists survive from.
Are you concerned about immigration?
You bet. Yeah, illegal immigration. Yeah. Well, this is 2007 we're talking now. I recall in 1986 that they were trying to get an immigration bill passed. And this was, to me, they tried the amnesty thing back then, which I was opposed to. I just think it's a bad way to go. To me, if you're an immigrant coming to the country and you're in the line to go through the process of trying to become a citizen, that's the way you do business. And to allow the illegals in to somehow come up and then get in the same position in line, guess what? It's correct at all. And how can they handle 11 million at one time? They probably can't. But you can't make it legal. It's like yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday, Bank of America came out and said they want to allow people to get credit cards without using a Social Security number. Basically what they're appealing to are not the legal immigrants, because they have Social Security numbers, but to the illegals. I mean, I think that's wrong. I mean, that's not something you can legislate, but it sees how people are trying to take advantage of things. I just think if you talk about trying to protect the borders, which is what they need to do, but you can't trade it out border patrol people to go down all the borders. But you got to enforce the laws that you have in the country. We have, I forget what the limits are now, but I recall back in '86, I think you were allowed to have something like 750,000 or 800,000 immigrants come in a year to get their green cards and then apply for their citizenship. You know, if they want to raise that number, that's one thing. Allow more people to come in. I mean, we're all immigrants from somewhere. But I just think there needs to be an orderly procedure. It needs to be done legally. And I just think the process that, you know, this, you know, like Bush didn't want to call it amnesty. He may not want to call it amnesty, but, you know, it's pretty close.
So a fence won't do it.
Well, did the Berlin Wall stop, you know, the people who try to jump the wall? No. People always will seek out freedom. You know, it's just, it's difficult, I mean, to do that. I mean, it's, you know, they will probably end up building a wall, but I remember in the mid-'80s, when a bomb went off, this is true, in the Senate anteroom out there. And, you know, it took them about 20 years to figure out who did it. But the next day, after that bomb went off, somebody got up and proposed on the floor of the Senate to build a wall around the whole Capitol grounds. This is true. You know, they were serious about it until I think Alan Simpson got up and told how stupid they were. But that's, you know, where you get reactive things instead of trying to get some logical thinking to issues. Now, there's been a lot of thinking going into the immigration issue. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, I don't know whether they're going to build a fence or what they're going to do. They may. But I think the issue more rests on the other side of talking to people in Central America, you know, Mexico and all those other countries to try to get them to control their own border, allowing the people to come in other than by the legal basis.
What was your reaction to the latest election?
Well, we're getting ready to have one on splosh tax down in Glenn County. Last year,
Yeah.
the handwriting was on the wall. It's, you know, they say to me, I've been giving speeches the last couple of years going back to saying how the Republican Party needs to get back to our basic principles, like I started out with in 1964. And I think we've moved away a little bit from those things. I think two reasons why they got wiped out, in my opinion, is number one, the Iraq War, the media kept beating that thing to death, you know, and then Bush himself. I think Bush is a good person, but he's not very articulate. And I think that's the thing that people saw, that they said, well, you know, he wasn't explaining it right. They didn't like his economic issues, you know, what he was doing, controlling spending. And they just decided, we'll give the other side a chance. On that. You know, that's what happened in 1980 when we got elected.
What do you think the new Democratic majority is going to do?
I have no idea. I know that when we went to the Senate in '81, we had set things we were going to do. We were going to cut the taxes. We did. We were going to fund the national defense programs, and we did. We were going to pass fewer laws, and we did. I'll never forget the Washington Post, after the first 2 years I was in the United States Senate, came out and said what a sorry Congress that was, because they passed the least laws of any Congress. Golly. You know, this, you know, which is, legislating is not the answer. You know, you don't need more laws. But this, what they're going to end up doing, I don't know. I think they've got the Democrats have got an onus on them being the majority of both parties. But you can pass things in the House that you can never get through in the Senate anyhow. But what they're going to do, I think this first 100-hour thing, you know, it's fine. Do what they want to do. But basically, they've got to come to grips with the issues of what we in America are concerned about. What are we concerned about? A, you go and spend too much money. You know, are you going to get any your hands around that and try to do something about it. On Iraq, they ran on Iraq. They ran hard left on Iraq, and they haven't said anything yet. They're trying to pass resolutions, but you pass resolutions for Lincoln's birthday, but it's not law. So resolutions are not law. So you have to, and I think they're all in a tight situation in respect to that. I mean, I think they make a big mistake if they attempt to go after the funding of the war because that would impact the troops in the field, troops here at home, and it would impact a lot of things.
Should we pull out?
No, I think you have to go with, first off, if we were all in here today, if we were each of us president of the United States, they just made us president of the United States, say, okay, here are the cards I've got, what do I do now? And that's the way you should do it. You can't say, well, you should have gone in the first place. You're there, and we've got troops there. There are other countries that got troops there, and you only have one president at a time now, and he's trying to make it work now. And we're going to see if this works, if this new injection of 20-some-odd thousand troops are going to work, if they can make that government over there come to the fore and help. There's a lot of ramifications out there in respect to all the surrounding countries. And, I heard Dick Lugar say, I was at the Ford funeral here last month, and Dick and I were talking, and he said, well, he wasn't anti the troops going in, but he says, what we need to do is make certain that we get the 5 surrounding countries together to sit down and talk. And that's true. I mean, you had Saudi Arabia, you had Jordan, Iran, Syria, and some of those other countries to sit down and see what they can work out. So you have to use a lot of different things. Sometimes the diplomacy will work, sometimes it won't work. But 8 and 1, they're in a war right now. My concern is Iraq, but my big concern is still Afghanistan.
Really?
I mean, I've always thought that Afghanistan was really the nest of the terrorists. So, but that's history. I mean, you can't go back and put the tube back in the toothpaste. So we're dealing here, us today, in what's happened today and where we go. And I think as you can see from the reluctance, a lot of them saying in Washington, D.C., they're not, they're afraid to say too much, because I think they would prefer that we come out on the best end of this thing, not just us, but the Iraq and the surrounding countries.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but as you said, now I'm going to hand you the presidency, and I'll hand you the cards. What would you do with Iran?
In what respect?
You ignore them?
You talking about the nuclear, or you talking about the conventional weapon?
The entire situation. They're all cards.
That's good. Glad you made me president right now. Can I quit right after that? Iran, I think you talk with them. I'm certain they've been doing a back channel. We used to call it back channel, but they probably need to have, as I said before, I think the suggestion of Dick Lugar in respect to getting 5 countries together, 5 or 6 countries together, and sitting down and talking. I think as far as their nuclear part of it, that's been going on for years. I mean, Israel bombed them many years ago about this. I remember being in Russia and talking to them about them, that they should be, trying to assist them in their reactors over there. can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, I recall in Pakistan, when we were opposed to Pakistan getting the bomb, and we probably ended up giving it to them, you know, and because they wanted it, because India had it, because India got it from Russia. And so there are a lot of nuclear countries out there. I think you got to figure out how you try to live in peace. I mean, I think to think that you're going to stop everybody from getting nuclear is probably, you know, it's the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. I remember going to the government of the Seychelles and getting them to sign this thing. Well, you can't make somebody anybody will sign that thing. That doesn't mean they're going to stop wanting it or getting it. That's why you think a law against bank robbing stops a bank robber. It doesn't do it. Okay. The more issue that I'm more concerned about is this business about them talking about lately about the weapons or the small weapons that are getting in from Iran over into Iraq. Well, you know, I'm not for them sending it over there, but if you look and see, you know, we're weapons dealers too. There are weapon dealers all over the world. I mean, China's shipping weapons all over the world. We ship weapons all over the world. I recall when I was ambassador to the Seychelles, there was a ship that was flagged, a Greek ship that was flagged, and they took the flag off and reflagged. It was out there in the Indian Ocean wandering around, and they put us all on notice that it was full of arms, bound for Somalia. It was going to run out of petrol and be at one of these ports. And gosh, lucky Mack, it ended up in our port. It ran out of gas there, but it was weapons from Eastern Europe, basically. You know, they manufactured AK-47s and all this sort of stuff, and they were all the way to Somalia. So you got a lot of weapons, people making weapons out there. You know, the French have sold to the people. I recall when I was at NATO, the Germans were selling things to Libya, which we had a boycott on. So it's getting back to Iran. You know, no telling where all the other weapons are that are in Iraq come from. I'm sure they're U.S. weapons, probably Chinese weapons, or probably weapons from all over. So I think that issue is not really that much of an issue. I think the main issue is what you presented. What do you do with Iran? And I think before you ever do it with force, that you need to be negotiating and talking with people.
Tell us about the Seychelles.
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 Well, the Seychelles are a group of 100 islands east of Africa. They cover 1 million square kilometers. There's only about 20 of them got people on them. And it's a long way. It's a 9.5-hour flight from Paris down there. So if you want to go, just make sure you take your cushion with you on the plane. But yeah, we had a tracking station there. Air Force did. And it was on top of one of the peaks. And you got the first look at most of the missiles and things that came up. And so we kept track of a lot of stuff. It was a spy station, basically. And but when I got there, it was in 1976. Well, it was a French colony. And then the French left it and became a British colony in 76. They gave it to the Seychelles and it became a republic. And 1 year later, they had a coup. And the Marxists took over. And the Soviets came in, the Cubans came in, so they were all, they were all that island. And of course, we had our tracking station there. And but it was basically a really Marxist country. I mean, they had a good-sized army, for the control of people. And when I went there, they were getting ready because the Soviet Union had fallen and Cuba was in dire needs and all that, so they were sort of bailing out. They left their KBG agents there and stuff. But But mainly what they were looking for is, they were trying to pass a constitution. And once again, you know, people came from different places, you know, like the UK, different places advising them on how to put together a constitution, property rights, you know, the rule of law and all these things. And the first constitution put together wasn't quite right. And the government had to call the election and everything. But the churches, once again, just like they did in Europe, with the Cold War, went to work. And they went to, it was predominantly Catholic, the Anglican and Catholic, and some evangelicals were there. And they went to the pulpits, and they, in the election, they won. I mean, they defeated the Constitution, they made them redo the Constitution. But what was interesting about the election, you go out there, you know, we've got ramps for everybody. Here you can see people, I mean, this place is 5 degrees below the equator. It's hot. Those people stood in lines for hours to go vote. They've never been allowed to vote. And it was amazing. You know, people, one arm, one leg. It was unbelievable how they would turn out and go vote in there. And then they came to the second election. They made a good constitution, passed it. So now it's a republic. I recall that I mean, it's out there, like I said, it's out there in the middle of nowhere. You were 1,000 miles from Diego Garcia, which is a naval base of ours, where we have B-52s on and all sorts of stuff. In fact, when I was chairman of military construction, I'm the one who got that appropriated the money to build that thing. And that when we would need assistance, like somebody got sick, we'd have to get them to fly, a plane from there over to the Seychelles and take them to Frankfurt, Germany for assistance. So, but that's where also I learned about the State Department aid programs. Nobody's ever been involved in the State Department. I don't speak highly of it sometimes, but they had what they call aid programs. They've been giving aid to the Seychelles. The problem is, generally speaking, that aid, it goes to the governments. It never gets down to the people. So I said, well, we just won't give them any. I said, do we have discretionary money? They said, yeah. I said, well, so I got my wife, I said, get another person, you go out around the countryside and find out where we might be able to help somebody. And she went out and found these orphanages and then these retirement places. They were all dirt floors. And so we took our money and went out and we bought sheets, towel, knife and fork, tables, gas-fired burners, stuff like that. These people didn't have. And take them to those places. I mean, it was amazing. It was just shocking. I mean, you wouldn't tolerate that stuff in this country. I mean, how they were living. But it was amazing what you could do and make people's lives better, something like that. And then in November of '93, that's when '92 is when Clinton got elected, which I knew my tenure was short. But anyhow, they had said that if I would call and ask, that I could stay. And I said I didn't think that was a good idea. My wife and I came home.
So you went from Indiana, the coldest of Indiana, to 5 degrees below or above the equator?
Below.
Below the
The
equator.
water went down the opposite way.
Okay. So then that, for all practical purposes, ended your political career, except for the fact that you now run the Ports Authority.
Well, really, in my political career, that was '93. This is 14 years later. I do a lot of fundraising for candidates, and help them. But, and now, for anybody who wants to know, who are you supporting for president? I mean, you probably end up asking this. I'm not supporting anybody at the moment, because I'm waiting for somebody who thinks like me first. But since that time in '93, In '97, my first wife died. We were in Indiana, and she had a pulmonary embolus, and we've been married almost 40 years, but some odd days shy of 40 years, and 10 years ago. And then I remarried. Been married for 8 years, and I married somebody else that was smarter than me. It seemed like you learn, not to marry two women that are smarter than you, but I did. But yeah, she was an attorney, but she doesn't practice now. But we got involved in different things, and then people, once you get involved, so like I've been on the trustees foundation for the Kennesaw University. I think have been on about 12 boards, mainly for fundraising, helping people raise money for the museum on St. Simon's Island, the turtle rehabilitation thing on Jekyll Island, Kennesaw University, and many other things. I've been involved with Purdue, Senator Purdue, put me on the, what they call the old BRAC Commission, the Base Realignment Commission, but it was Military Affairs Commission. In fact, Sam and I both co-chaired this. And they wanted me to be, I was going to Strom Thurmond's funeral in the early part of 2003, right after Purdue got elected. And I was driving up to Strom's funeral, and the cell phone rings, and it was the governor of Purdue, wanted me to become Goldman, Georgia Port Authority. I said, Sonny, I don't need anything. I said, you don't want to do this. He said, how about call me back at the funeral? I said, okay, I'll call you back. So anyhow, he called me back in the afternoon when I was coming down I-95 and said, yep, asking to be on that thing. I said, well, let me suggest something. He said, no, I don't want anybody, I want you. So I said, okay, I'll take it on one thing. I said, if I decide I want to do something else, I can leave. He said, okay. So the Georgia Ports Authority is, there are 13 board members now. There used to be 9 until one of our previous governors packed it, sort of like the Supreme Court, with too many people. But anyhow, it's a big business. We have 2 ports, you know. For everybody's edification, there are 361 ports in the United States. Georgia has 2. Savannah is one of them. It's the 4th largest container port in the United States now. And Brunswick is the 6th largest importer and exporter of automobiles in the United States. So when you look at things that you want to find things, I think the Ports Authority there may be one other, but I think the Ports Authority is the only thing that's a quasi-government thing in the state of Georgia that makes money. And we impact about, either have direct or indirect, create about 275,000 jobs. It's a money-making thing. Any money we've borrowed by bonds has all been repaid. So it's really a highly successful business. It's a big business. Trade is a big business. We have got in the United States, out of all the ports, we've got a better trade balance than anybody. I think we're 53-47 import-export, which is good. Where a lot of places are 80-20, 70-30, stuff like that. So, in fact, we export 80,000 Mercedes a year to Europe through Brunswick. They're manufactured in Vance, Alabama, and we export them out of Brunswick, Georgia. But anyhow, the port is a big business. It's we pay the directors on the board of directors $40 in the meeting, which I told Sonny I wouldn't take the money, and, you know, because I didn't want anybody to say, well, you can take it money and all sorts of stuff, you know. So I can operate the way I want to operate the thing. So, but we got a really good, strong group now, and the board's doing good. And the taxpayers are the beneficiary, basically, and the people are employed by it.
Glad we run out of time. Is there anything that you would like to say that you haven't said?
Oh, probably, but I won't remember till tomorrow. No, I've had a good life. It's been great. it's, I could have asked for all the blessings that I've had in my life. You know, anything you regret? Yeah, probably. You know, whatever my sins have been, I regret them. You know, I've done some things I wish I could change. But all in all, it's been a great one.
You've been a great public servant, served your state and your nation well. And I think that our audience here today will agree with me when I say that you can tell those people in Indiana that you're a great Georgian.
Thank you.